In 1854, word spread across Louisiana that two enslaved children, Adira, age 12, and Silas, age 11, had vanished from the LaRue plantation without leaving a single footprint behind. By sunrise, their owner had summoned a coalition of planters, furious that two small runaways had slipped past traps built to contain grown men. Within days, over 100 armed bounty hunters were crawling through the swamps, convinced the chase would end by nightfall. But it didn't, because each time a hunter claimed to have cornered the children, his dogs turned on him. His boat capsized or his trail markers were rearranged in ways no adult could explain. By the end of the month, entire search parties were quitting in fear, and the cartel was begging for answers. How did two children outmaneuver a 100 hunters? And why did every man who underestimated them vanish first? But let me start from the beginning. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The sun hung low over the cane fields, bleeding orange across the rows where Adira and Silas dragged themselves toward the quarters. Adira's hands burned from the day's work. 12 hours of bundling cut stalks, her fingers raw and sticky with sap. Beside her, Silas limped slightly, favoring his left foot, where a stone had worked through his worn shoe that morning. Neither spoke. The heat pressed down like a hand on their shoulders, but something felt wrong. Adira noticed at first, deep ruts in the dirt path where no wagon should have traveled today. The tracks curved toward the main house, then circled back toward the slave quarters. Fresh tracks, recent. She slowed her pace. Around them, adults huddled in tight groups, their voices low and urgent. Old Moses stood with his wife near the well, speaking in harsh whispers. When Adira tried to catch his eye, he looked away quickly, his jaw tight. Adira. Silas's voice was small. Why is everyone acting funny? She didn't answer. Her chest had gone tight. They rounded the corner toward their cabin, and Adira's world stopped. A wagon stood in the clearing, not the supply wagon or the cotton cart. This one had iron bars built into its sides. A trader's cart. She knew what it meant. Everyone knew what it meant. Her mother stood near it. Mary Ann's hands were bound in front of her with rough hemp rope. Two men flanked her, one the trader, recognizable by his stained leather vest and the keys hanging from his belt. The other was Brant, the plantation's new overseer, his face blank and businesslike. Adira's legs moved before her mind caught up. She ran. Mama. Brant's hand shot out, catching Adira's shoulder hard enough to spin her sideways. She stumbled, but kept pushing forward, her vision blurring. Let me go, Mama. Mary Ann's eyes found hers. For one terrible moment, their gazes locked. Her mother's face was calm. Impossibly calm, but her eyes held something desperate and fierce. Adira, stop. Mary Ann's voice cut through the chaos. Steady, clear. Adira froze. Silas crashed into her from behind, sobbing. What are they doing? Where are they taking her? The trader opened the cart's rear gate. The iron hinges screamed. Brant's grip tightened on Adira's shoulder. Back to your cabin. Both of you. No. Silas wailed. You can't. Mary Ann stepped toward the cart without being pushed. She moved with dignity, her head high, even as the trader grabbed her elbow to steady her climb. But just before she entered, she turned back one final time. Her lips barely moved. Her voice was a whisper that somehow carried across the distance. Run when the night turns quiet. Then she was inside. The gate clanged shut. The wagon rolled away. Adira stood frozen, Brant's hand still heavy on her shoulder. She watched the cart disappear down the long drive toward the main road. Dust rose in its wake, hanging in the thick evening air. When the wagon was finally gone, Brant released her. He crouched down, bringing his face level with hers. His breath smelled like tobacco. Morning brings reassignments, he said quietly. Master LaRue is reorganizing the work crews. You two will be separated to different sections of the plantation. Easier to manage that way. Silas made a wounded sound. Brant stood. Get to your cabin. Stay there. He walked away without looking back. Adira sat on the cabin's dirt floor while Silas cried into her lap. She stroked his hair mechanically, her own face dry. She couldn't afford tears yet. Not when Silas needed her to be strong. She's gone, Silas choked out. She's really gone. I know. What are we going to do? Adira didn't answer right away. Her mind was already moving, clicking through details she'd spent years collecting without knowing why. She had always been observant. Too observant for a child, some adults said. While other children played, Adira watched. She watched the guards change shifts every 6 hours. She watched how the north fence sagged where termites had weakened the posts. She watched the sugar mill's drainage system, noticing how water flowed through channels beneath the building's foundation. Last winter, during repairs, she'd seen workers expose a damaged section of the drainage tunnel, a section that ran all the way to the irrigation ditch beyond the plantation's eastern boundary. The workers had patched it poorly, more interested in getting out of the cold than doing thorough work. Adira had filed that information away along with everything else. Guard patterns, weak spots, escape routes. She had never planned to use any of it, but she'd prepared anyway, just in case. Now that day had come. Silas. Her voice was calm, controlled. We're leaving tonight. He lifted his head, his face blotchy and wet. What? We can't wait until morning. If they separate us, we'll never get another chance. But where will we go? Away. Anywhere that isn't here. Silas's eyes went wide with fear. They'll catch us. They'll hurt us. Maybe. Adira met his gaze steadily. But if we stay, we lose each other forever. I won't let that happen. She stood and began gathering what little they had. A piece of dried cornbread wrapped in cloth. A small tin cup, a half-full water skin Marianne had kept hidden under her sleeping mat. Everything fit into a cloth pouch small enough to tie around Adira's waist. Silas watched her move with growing understanding. You've been thinking about this for a long time. The quarters grew quiet as night deepened. Through the cabin's gaps, Adira watched the guard posted near their section. A young man named Webb, who often dozed during the late shift. She'd watched him for months. His pattern never changed. At midnight, his head drooped forward. Now, Adira whispered. They slipped through the cabin door like shadows. The night air was thick and warm, filled with the chirp of crickets. Adira led Silas between buildings, keeping to the darkest spaces, moving when clouds covered the moon. The sugar mill loomed ahead, a massive wooden structure that smelled perpetually of burnt sugar and machinery oil. They crept along its western wall, then circled to the rear where maintenance equipment lay scattered. Adira knelt beside a section of wall where boards had rotted at their bases. She'd checked this spot 3 times over the past year, always finding it the same. Neglected, forgotten, she pulled. The boards came away easily, revealing a dark opening just wide enough for a child. The tunnel. Entrance. Silas stared at the blackness beyond. His breathing came fast and shallow. I'm scared, he whispered. Me, too. Adira dropped to her hands and knees. The tunnel smelled of stagnant water and earth. She couldn't see anything beyond the first few feet. Behind them, somewhere in the darkness, Webb might wake at any moment. Morning would bring separation. The trader's cart already carried their mother toward some unknown fate. Forward was terror. Staying was worse. Adira crawled into the tunnel. After a moment's hesitation, Silas followed. The darkness swallowed them both. The tunnel swallowed all light within a few feet of the entrance. Adira crawled forward on her hands and knees, her palms sinking into cold mud that squelched between her fingers. The passage was barely wide enough for her shoulders. Rough wooden support beams scraped against her back with each movement. Behind her, she heard Silas's ragged breathing, quick and panicked. Keep moving, she whispered. Don't stop. The darkness pressed against her eyes like a physical weight. She couldn't see anything. Not the walls, not the ground, not even her own hands stretched out before her. She moved by touch alone, feeling each surface carefully, remembering the tunnel's layout from the winter repairs. The air tasted thick and stale. It carried the mineral smell of wet earth mixed with something sharper. Rot maybe, or stagnant water pooling somewhere beneath them. Every few feet, her fingers brushed through spider webs. She felt the insects scatter across her wrists, but forced herself not to react. Silas whimpered softly. I'm right here, Adira said. Follow my voice. The tunnel curved slightly to the left. She remembered this section from watching the workers. The drainage channel followed the mill's foundation for about 30 yards, then angled toward the eastern irrigation ditch. If they could reach that point, they'd be beyond the plantation boundary. Her hand touched something cold and metallic. She froze. Her fingers traced the object carefully in the darkness. thin wire stretched taut across the tunnel at knee height. She followed it with one hand to the left wall where it connected to something that rattled faintly when she brushed it. Bells. Her heart hammered against her ribs. What's wrong? Silas whispered behind her. Adira's mind raced. The wire hadn't been here during the winter repairs. This was new, recent, which meant someone had anticipated this exact escape route and rigged it with alarms. Master LaRue had planned for this. She forced herself to breathe slowly, thinking through the problem. The wire was thin, probably fishing line or something similar. The bells were attached to the wall, likely small brass ones that would jangle loudly if the wire was disturbed. If they tried to crawl under it, their backs would catch it. If they tried to step over it, they'd lose their balance in the confined space and trigger it anyway. Adira, Silas's voice shook. What is it? A trap, she said quietly. But I can fix it. She reached into the small pouch at her waist and found the tin cup. The metal was thin and slightly bent. She worked it carefully under the wire where it connected to the wall mounting using the cup's edge as a lever. The wire resisted. She applied more pressure, moving slowly, listening for any sound that would indicate she'd failed. The mounting bracket shifted. She held her breath and eased the wire free from its anchor point. The line went slack. The bells remained silent. Okay, she breathed. We can go. She crawled forward, holding the loosened wire high so Silas could pass beneath it. He squeezed past her, his shoulder bumping hers in the tight space. That was close, he whispered. Too close. They continued deeper into the tunnel. Adira's arms ached from crawling. Her knees were scraped raw. But the fear of what lay behind them pushed her forward. The tunnel began to smell different, fresher, with a hint of moving water. They were getting closer to the end. Then her outstretched hand met a wall of debris. No, she whispered. Her fingers explored the blockage desperately. Broken wooden beam, collapsed earth, chunks of what felt like brick or stone. The tunnel was completely sealed. Silas crawled up beside her, his hand finding the same obstacle. What do we do? Adira's throat tightened. All the planning, all the years of watching and waiting for nothing. They were trapped in a tunnel that ended in a dead collapse with alarm bells behind them and dawn approaching fast. She fought down the rising panic and forced herself to think. The storm. 2 days ago, a violent thunderstorm had blown through, flooding the fields and damaging several outbuildings. The workers had been sent out the next morning to assess the damage. Had the storm caused this collapse? She felt along the debris pile, searching for any gap or weakness. Her hand pushed through a space between two beams, and she felt air moving against her skin. Air from outside. There's an opening, she said. She pulled at the beams, testing their stability. One shifted. She pulled harder, ignoring the splinters digging into her palms. The beam came free with a grinding sound, and the gap widened. Not much, maybe a foot wide, but enough. I'm going through, Adira said. Then I'll pull you after me. She didn't wait for Silas to argue. She pushed her head and shoulders into the gap, feeling jagged edges of broken wood scraping against her arms. Something sharp caught her left forearm and tore a line of fire across her skin. She bit down on her lip to keep from crying out. Her shoulders wedged tight. For a terrible moment, she thought she was stuck, that she'd trapped herself halfway through like an animal in a snare. But she twisted sideways, pushing with her feet, and felt herself slide forward. The gap opened into a wider space. She tumbled out onto soft earth, gasping. Cool night air touched her face. Stars overhead, the smell of swamp water and growing things. They were outside the plantation boundary. Silas, she called softly into the gap. His face appeared in the opening, pale and frightened. She reached in and grabbed his wrists, pulling while he pushed with his feet. He came through easier than she had, being smaller, though he gasped when the same sharp edge caught his shoulder. They lay in the mud together, breathing hard. Adira looked around, getting her bearings. The tunnel had dumped them into a marshy area thick with tall grass. About 20 yards ahead, she could see the dark shapes of cypress trees rising from standing water. The grove she'd spotted months ago while working in the far eastern field. Come on, she said, standing on shaky legs. We need to hide before they realize we're gone. The ground sucked at their feet with every step. The water rose from their ankles to their knees as they waded toward the cypress grove. Something splashed nearby, a fish or turtle disturbed by their passage. The night chorus of frogs and insects surrounded them, impossibly loud after the tunnel's silence. Adira's cut arm throbbed with each heartbeat. She could feel blood running down to her elbow, warm and sticky, but she couldn't stop to tend it. Not yet. They reached the largest cypress tree and found a space beneath its exposed roots where the water was shallower. Adira pulled Silas down beside her into the narrow hollow. The roots formed a cage around them, protective, concealing. "Try to sleep," Adira whispered. "I can't." But his voice was already slurring with exhaustion. Adira wrapped her arms around him. Her own eyes burned with fatigue. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest. She let her head fall back against the rough bark and felt herself sliding toward unconsciousness. Just before sleep took her, she whispered a prayer for her mother. A horn blast woke them. Adira jerked upright, her heart racing. Sunlight filtered through the cypress canopy overhead, turning the swamp water gold.